Hey, deserving listeners, the Ultimatum. Let's check it out.
The way I reacted to you accusing me earlier, maybe I shouldn't have never acted the way I did. Maybe I should have been more calm and more patient. But I think that right now we owe each other to actually have a conversation.
Okay, so that's a good opener. Mildred is saying maybe I shouldn't have. It's in the direction of healthy and fair. It would have been more healthy, more fair if Mildred, if I'm understanding the situation right, could have said, I'm sorry for getting hostile. I'm sorry for having a mean, aggressive tone of voice. I'm sorry for assuming things, and that's my issue, so I'm sorry. And I would like to have a conversation because I feel like we haven't really talked about things or something like that. Because it's fine if you want to have a conversation and you feel like your partner is shutting you out or avoiding, then absolutely, you can bring that up. That's good. Let's see how this goes.
I hope you know how much I care about you. Despite what has happened, like, I'm real, man, like...
But what has happened? Because we haven't talked about it. I could tell you I care about you a lot too, but if you care about me, then we should have a conversation.
Okay. Yeah. Aussie says, I want you to know I care about you despite what has happened. And then Mildred says, well, what has happened? Because, you could say that, but I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what Mildred is looking for in this moment. I think possibly, I don't know. It's hard to know. I'm guessing Mildred is worried. So this is my guess, is that given the way that they come together as a couple, or, just given the format, I've talked about this before, they all are in the same area, all 10 of them, and they're dating and getting to know each other. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of extreme intimacy, especially given the time frame. Then they choose someone, and then they move in together. And instantly they're having conflicts just because they don't know each other. And so what I've been saying is, like, it would be better if you had another week where you lived apart and you dated and you could court each other and have that normal phase. It would still be very short, but at least there'd be some time to actually get to know someone before you lived with them, right? So what I'm guessing is, they came together and there was some awkwardness and some uncertainty and no connection, because how could there be? There was a guess of a connection, like, well, I think I might connect with you, but no connection yet, right? And it's just awkwardness, and they're also living on top of each other, trying to coordinate who's going to use the bathroom. There was a conversation about that, right? And then for Mildred, she's trying to work stuff out and also trying to get some reassurance, as anyone would, that Aussie actually likes her, something like that, some security, some indication. And Aussie avoids and will distance, right? So Mildred pursues. And then because this is happening, it starts to run away with itself. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more that Mildred pursues, maybe in the beginning in a functional way, the more that Aussie distances, maybe in a functional way. And then eventually we get down a road where the avoiding and the pursuing is noticeably not functional. It's easier to identify with the Aussie position here because Mildred tends to come across, at least in that previous conversation, as seemingly unfairly hostile. But it can be very frustrating when someone doesn't communicate. When, if Aussie says, I can't talk about it right now, and then never wants to talk about it, then you have a legitimate bone to pick. Now, how do you pick that bone? Do you just amp up your hostility and your pursuing? No, there's other ways that are helpful, and of course, couple therapy can help with this, by the way.
I'm asking for you to open up and communicate with me, and I think that
we are, and now we're all serious and. Okay,
we don't have to be serious. That requires communication. That requires owning up to our responsibilities.
Yeah, so Aussie seems uncomfortable and seems to be wanting to get out of the conversation. I think I suspect because Aussie knows where Mildred is headed, and then pretty quickly Mildred starts to become accusatory and hostile. Why? And can't Mildred see that maybe Aussie is avoiding because of this? They have a history of this already between the two of them. So, it's not going to help to become hostile and lay into someone. But I get the impulse. If any of you are in a relationship with someone who avoids, you know how it feels. It doesn't feel good. It feels rejecting. It feels unsafe. It feels unnecessary. Like, just talk to me. What's going on? Meet me halfway so I don't have to constantly pursue you and pry things out of you. It's hurtful. And it's frustrating because you don't know what to do, because all you can do from that side of things is invite the other person. It's like trying, if you've ever had a cat and say the cat runs out of the front door and you're trying to get the cat back in, and the cat is pretty agile. You walk up to the cat, and the closer you get, the cat runs away. And you're just like, I'm trying to help, come here, back inside that. And it's maybe if we had some sort of food or something we could entice distancers with, you open up, because that's how you get a cat. You open up the can of food, they come running. Anyway, so it can be frustrating. It doesn't justify hostility. It doesn't justify being mean or abusive or unfair, but the frustration is real. Now, the two of them are arguably barely a relationship. So if Mildred feels entitled somehow, if I were Mildred's friend, I'd be like, look, if Aussie's being a jerk face or distancing or something, then, you got 3 weeks together, do what you can, but it's probably not going to work anyway. So you certainly don't want to just make it worse. And, it doesn't really matter because you're not building a life with Aussie. I don't think anyone believes that. And now, if Mildred had a tremendous love for Aussie and was really fighting for something that was worth fighting for, I would understand the premise. I still wouldn't recommend the hostility, but I just don't understand what the point is.
We actually both signed up for this, so...
We did sign up for it, not saying that I didn't.
That's a good feeling to have. You're surprised.
I was just trying to stay on a high. Like, I just walked in this door.
But what makes you think that our conversation can be a high? Why do you think that our conversation is negative? Is that how you associate comfort?
Yeah, Aussie is seeing through it, saying, I think you're turning my words against me. You're trying to look for a reason to fight with me. Now, another possibility is that Mildred is trying to play along with the production and amping up conflict and drama for the cameras. I hate thinking that about people, but it's possible. Aussie even accused Mildred of that last time, saying, it seems like every time the cameras are here, you start accusing me of things that aren't actually happening. But yeah, this has turned a corner, and regardless of how justified one can feel regarding trying to get someone to contact you, trying to get the distancer to talk, nothing justifies where Mildred is going here in my book.
Your tone of voice.
My tone of voice can be so many different levels. I can have emotions.
You can. Yeah.
Just because the way you associate your life with being calm all the time and quiet, that doesn't mean that I am like that, Aussie. We're different.
Yeah, it's upsetting to watch. It's heading into abuse. I don't know how Aussie feels, but this is the pattern of an emotional abusive person, someone who finds whatever they can find to berate and belittle and attack and dominate and bulldoze and excuse the self to amp up their own entitlement. It's an absolutely valid point that Aussie's saying, well, it's your tone of voice. And for Mildred, she twists it into, that's how I feel. And that's normal, abusive person or not. People often will say that, and when in my office I try to help them clarify that. It's like, well, that's not how you feel. If we want to talk about how you feel, like your baseline emotion, then the only phrases that actually pass for how you feel, if we're talking about emotions, are I am hurt, I am scared, I am angry, I am joyous, I am happy, I am content, I am disgusted. That's how you feel. What you do with that feeling is what you do. There are decisions that you make and ways of interpreting that. And so to be hostile and to have a tone, that's not how you feel. That's a choice based on your emotion. And I get the progression, but it doesn't justify it. Also, your feelings aren't always necessarily valid and justifiable. Just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that it's justified and gives you full license. You know, it's almost like people are saying, well, that's how I feel, thus I can do anything I want. That doesn't make any sense. So Mildred is saying that. But let's rewind. So I don't know about Mildred. I don't know. I don't know. She could be totally justified in all this. Aussie could be a jerk face. I can't imagine anything justifying what she's doing right now. But at the very least, maybe there's a justification for the frustration. And maybe for Mildred, she never does this with anyone else. She's never like this. She's just like this right now. So I can't tell. But we can evaluate for some of you, because I know some of you actually like it when I do this, because you have been verbally and emotionally abused by people and were tricked, maybe even gaslit over time, into questioning your own evaluation and your own feelings about the way that people are treating you. Some of you might literally have someone like this in your life. Some of you might be like this and might benefit from understanding and reflecting on your own behavior. So let's just look at exactly the choices that Mildred is making in this conversation. Let's rewind it.
Your tone,
Is that how you associate confrontation?
your tone of voice.
My tone of voice can be so many different levels. I can have emotions.
You can. Yeah.
Just because the way you associate your life with being calm all the time and quiet, that doesn't mean that I am like that, Elsie.
Okay, watching it a second time, it's not as bad on the second watch. So I don't want to say much more than that. There's a softness-ish to Mildred's voice, but the way there's so if I were there, what I would say to Mildred is, okay, let's take a break and just talk with me, Mildred. How do you feel? What's going on? And typically everyone will say something like, well, I feel like Aussie is distancing from me, and that's not not okay. That's not how you are in a relationship. And I say, okay, so that's how you feel. In my head, I'm like, that's not how you feel, but I don't want to have an argument with someone. So I'd say, okay, so what's the underlying emotion? What's happening in your body? Sometimes I'll point to body as a way of like, to pay attention to what's happening in your body, because we need to know that, and you need to know that. We can talk about all the other things, but if we avoid that or we're not aware of that, we don't feel safe to acknowledge that, then a lot of bad things can happen. So what's happening? It might take literally months, if not years, for someone to be able to answer that question. It's not an easy question for people to answer. I'll ask therapists that question, trainees that question, and it might take them months, if not years, to answer. I mean, maybe not years, but people that work in the field that have a lot of education and knowledge about emotions, that even help their own clients with emotions. It's just really scary. There's a lot of traumas around our emotions and around revealing that or acknowledging them to ourselves. So it's hard. But what I would hope is that Mildred would get to a place where she could say that I feel scared that I'm going to lose Aussie. I'm also hurt that Aussie doesn't seem to care enough about the relationship to meet me halfway, something like that. And say, okay, so that's it. And then Aussie, often the Aussies of the world will be like, oh, that's how you feel? Well, okay, but don't be hostile. Because if you're in Aussie's shoes, all you see is the anger and the hostility and the bulldozing. It just feels like, okay, so you just want to attack me. You don't necessarily intuit the fear and the hurt behind that.
That's
We're
fine.
different.
We're very different.
Yes.
Exactly.
And it's okay if I raise my voice.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean I'm an angry woman. It just means that I want to be heard.
It's also okay for me not to be ready to have this confrontation. Like after I just came back from.
And of course, there could be a cultural difference here, a family difference, a difference in upbringing or community regarding what is the acceptable range or the comfortable range of tone. And it's possible that for Mildred and the people that she was raised with, the people she normally hangs out with, I can imagine Tiff kind of being in this camp that raising one's voice, the threshold is much higher as in terms of what is considered not okay to the other person, what's hurtful or scary to the other person than for other people. It certainly looks like that's at least part of this conflict. And now Aussie's getting up, which I'm guessing is not going to go over well with Mildred. I'm guessing that Mildred is, at this point, having her hurt and fear confirmed. There she goes again, leaving me, and that's just not okay. And because I'm not safe, or I don't have differentiation enough to look at my pain and my fear, I'm going to get really angry.
Like a night out with my buds, like you say, and like now we're doing this and I'm not ready to do this. I'm not ready to, like, I want to go back out, actually. Can I just go back out? Like,
I mean, I don't know if you're asking me or you're telling me, but I'm not in charge of you.
I know you're not.
Yeah, okay. So I think maybe a lot of the viewers might look at Aussie and say, like, well, this is weird. You're just like ditching Mildred. And yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really matter in this phase. I'm actually kind of looking forward to the third phase where they actually get back to their partner, because it's just clear that Mildred and Aussie aren't a good match and are stuck with each other and are just waiting. Clearly, Aussie is just waiting for that time span to be over, which, so that's all that I see, really.
Take care of myself. I have to prioritize my mental health. We've had those, awesome, amazing, like, time standstill moments, but I don't want to be married to someone who couldn't communicate with me effectively, couldn't give me what I needed in order for us to talk.
Yeah, I don't know who's to blame. I think it's tempting to look at Mildred as the primary, if not the only person to blame, but I can't really tell. Absolutely, Mildred did some things that were not helpful and destructive, but it's possible that Aussie was avoiding up until that point in a lot of destructive ways as well. There seems to be some potential evidence of that. I'm just glad that Aussie is pulling the plug and that Aussie isn't worried about a contract problem being fined if Aussie doesn't stay with Mildred, because I'm pretty sure in the contract they say you have to stick it out for those 3 weeks, because that usually is in those kind of contracts. So I'm glad that Aussie is taking care of themselves. And I would imagine that would be a thing, right? That to live with someone in a situation like this would be rough. Even if you were sleeping in different rooms, you just wouldn't feel safe, right? So, yeah, I mean, it didn't work out. So, great. Essentially, it was like dating someone, and you got to a certain point, you're just, for whatever reason, it's just not working out. So, let's just call it quits.
And get the fuck out of here. I am not running away. I am taking care of me first, for the first time in a long time.
It's up in flames.
Okay, so Aussie is not telling Mildred in person, which I'm sure is going to be talked about. But I would hope that Mildred would just say, like, okay, I have my complaints about Aussie, but it just didn't work out. And what are you going to do? We gave it a shot, and maybe I was a jerk face, maybe Aussie's, I don't know. But I will just move on with my life. But I doubt that will happen.
I'm ready for marriage, and I thought I had resolved it. But now I feel like I don't want resentment. I don't want drama. Far from that. Marriage isn't the thing that I made it out to be. I'm not ready for it.
Okay, so let's look here. It's something Mildred. I wish this experience went better than it did for both of us. I was really wanting this to work. It's a shame it had to end this way. Thank you for the links, for the laughs. And so, okay, that's good. No blaming, just, hey, it didn't work out. I'm sorry. Yeah, good note. But I'm guessing Mildred is not going to be happy. You would think that Mildred would be like, oh, good riddance. I mean, that was really a disaster. I'm glad it ended. I don't have to make that call, so I'm not in breach of contract. And it is absolutely in line with an hypothesis I had about Aussie, about potentially being on the avoidant attachment spectrum, in that when push comes to shove and there is a threat in the relationship, when there's conflict, avoidant people tend to avoid, and they are much more likely to have an impulse to break up, and they often will break up. So we're seeing evidence of that. But there's some rationality to that, to at least this one with Mildred. It also is in line with the distancing. Avoidant people tend to distance, not always. And we heard some things with Sam and Aussie that were along those lines. It also could just be that Aussie is just that sort of person and isn't really interested in long-term relationships with people. So, there's no way to know for sure, but I'm sure some of you were thinking, isn't this in line with avoidant attachment? And maybe we'll get some more data.
Aww. Aussie's things are gone. And like, I mean, it doesn't make a difference for me. Like, I have no type of emotion when it comes to it.
Okay, that makes sense, given that they had no connection. Their relationship was extremely brief. And yeah, okay. So that's almost the best scenario that Mildred would have. Although I guess Mildred could say, you know what, I'm kind of happy, I'm relieved, but Mildred's saying, I have no emotion. Yeah, I think that points to the fact that they did not have a relationship. They were not meant to be together.
Like, she could have placed it back there so that it's not in my way. Aussie leaving has nothing to do with me. Like, I mean, that's what you want to do, then that's fine, Yeah, I just don't. You know what I do? I just really, really, really fucking wish that she would fucking take out the trash.
I can't. It's uncomfortable. That's why I'm laughing. I'm not laughing at her. It just looks like maybe Mildred has some feelings about it and is just saying that she doesn't have feelings about it, which is understandable. I can imagine this to be very sudden and very hurtful and embarrassing, humiliating, maybe. I don't know how Mildred feels, but it seems like maybe Mildred is having an escalation in some sort of feeling and is trying not to show it or acknowledge it. It doesn't feel safe to acknowledge it. It would make total sense for Mildred to feel sad, hurt, abandoned. Make total sense. And to be angry about it, it makes sense.
Trash, there's fucking tampons in here. I don't know, is there a way I can call Sam so she can come take Aussie's trash? Because she likes to pick up after her, I bet.
Yeah, I feel bad for Mildred. I wonder if for her, whatever relational trauma she has, I mean, we all have them, that it makes it so that she doesn't have an effective way of navigating these emotions. And one of the ways that she typically will do, one of the ways that she will typically navigate her emotions is to try to externalize them with the person that you're with in that fighting kind of a way. We heard about a lot of fighting between Mildred and Tiff, so I don't know if it's that, but I just wonder if for Mildred, given all the complexities of life and emotion, and given her relational traumas, she has a very limited set of options that feel available to her, that were maybe modeled to her growing up, or that are, safe enough for her to do. I don't know. She seems stunned. I think if Aussie were there, I think she would do what we've seen. And instead, there's no one to do that with, and so she doesn't know what to do. But I think she actually is quite hurt. And I think she actually is quite sad and feels maybe worthless. It wouldn't be uncommon for someone when we feel worthless, when we're made to feel worthless, we have a number of options. And one of the options is to overcompensate by making sure that you always fight when someone treats you in your perception as you are worthless. If someone is distancing themselves from you or someone's insulting you, then you will fight. And you learned that when you were young. You learned, like, I'm being treated like I'm worthless, and at least I'll go down with a fight. At least I will have some integrity and I'll have some self-esteem that I didn't let it just happen, that I did something about it. and that I gave them my 2 cents. I said my piece, and they know that I'm a strong person, and it locks in this pattern. But if the target isn't around to engage, you're just left with your own worthlessness, your feeling of worthlessness. And then maybe even that voice in her head of, am I to blame? Did I do this? Is this all my fault? Am I broken? I wouldn't be surprised, given the very little I've heard about Mildred and her relationship with Tiff and the behavior that we've seen, if for Mildred she has a real strong schema that she's worthless and no one will ever love her. It's interesting on this season, there's a fair amount of that for people. And of course, when you're queer, you will experience a lot of bigotry and a lot of hatred, sometimes from a very early age. So, of course, that's traumatic and can make you feel worthless, right? So maybe there's some of that involved, obviously. I don't know. But yeah, I feel bad for Mildred.
Just wish she would have talked to me or listened to me when I was going through something, like regular partners do.
Yeah, and now she's crying. Yeah, I think there's a lot happening for Mildred right now. I think there's a lot happening. And I want everyone to really, really internalize this, if you haven't already, that the people that come across as the most hostile or as the most self-centered or as the most problematic are often the people that are struggling the most. It doesn't justify it, but it does explain it. And if we can see that, particularly if we're close enough, particularly if we have the ability to help, if we can see them truly, if we can see through the defenses, through the barriers, through the bravado, then we might be able to access this and not only help them, but help us if we're in a relationship with them. Because how much more helpful would it have been if Aussie and maybe Tiff were to help and make Mildred feel safe enough to go to this place? Because it's so much more, it provokes compassion and empathy and understanding. Instead, though, what you see from Mildred is what we've seen. And it naturally causes people to move away or to fight back. I think Tiff probably tends to fight back. Aussie runs. And if you're a clinician, if you're a therapist, or even an ancillary helper, ancillary to therapy, like if you're a physician or something, and you recognize that this is likely what's going on behind problematic behavior, then again, you'll have a road to actually helping, which is what we've been called upon to do as clinicians and maybe even in life.
I'm having all of these feelings from being abandoned in my life. My mother abandoned me when I was 5 years old, and then my father left, and then I lost my godmother at 12 years old, and it just kept going and going and going.
Okay. Yeah, that'll do it. I'm guessing a lot of you, having watched the show, are like, wait, Kirk, it's coming. And yeah, that'll do it. That explains everything. The abandonment, both her parents, and then it sounds like her godmother died. Even at the age of 12, you end up feeling, particularly when you're 5, you feel like you're worthless. They would have stuck around if I was a better kid. I know some of you absolutely can relate to this. And it's a tragedy of child abandonment. Even if a parent dies and the child understands, they didn't abandon me, they died. It was an accident. There's this irrational association that children naturally have, which is, if I was a better person, if I was a better kid, they wouldn't have died. They would have lived, or they wouldn't have gotten divorced, or they wouldn't have left me and moved to another state and left me with my mom or whatever. So, yeah. And good for her that she can identify that and go there. This exhibits a lot of health, actually, because I was worried that she was just going to drink and avoid and transfer into anger, but she's actually going to the core. Now, I'm guessing similar to Vanessa, when Vanessa broke down in relation to Xander having revealed that Xander had a connection with Ray, that the extreme nature of the triggering and the emotionality is overriding Mildred's normal defenses. And tomorrow, Mildred will re-engage in the defensive structure of hostility and believing that she's unaffected by things and that she's quote unquote stronger than that or something. But we'll see. Maybe this is normal for Mildred to, you know what, I have this issue. And the fact that Mildred connect it to her childhood shows a lot of self-awareness and a lot of strength. And the fact that Mildred can show that to the cameras is, it's healthy. And in this moment, it's not like Mildred is saying Aussie is a jerk face. Mildred's saying, this is triggering my abandonment issues. And that's what's happening because, that's the way it looked.
And then I got married and then they left. It just feels like that again. I don't want to be here alone because I don't want to start telling myself that I did something wrong or that it's my fault because it's not my fault.
Right. Yeah. There it is. That's the tragedy of this, being treated the way that she did. This is Mildred at 5, crying herself to sleep every night. It just brings a tear to the eye, doesn't it? And saying, it's not my fault, but she's having an argument with herself in this moment because the dominant voice in her head is, it is your fault. And not only your fault, but you're worthless. You're unlovable. You're despicable. You're flawed. You're inherently a problem. You're inherently abandonable. No one will love you. Oh, it's heartbreaking. Oh, it's just, why would you abandon a child? I actually have a song about this called Abandon. You can go to Spotify and go to Bread Knife Incident, and it's about an amalgamation of clients and people I know. This little girl, the story in the song is this little girl is watching her father drive away, and he's never going to return. And she will always feel this way for the rest of her life, this sense of abandonment and helplessness and worthlessness. And it's just such a tragedy. It's so awful. And it makes sense that she's triggered in this moment. Makes sense that she would have a tough exterior and a real fighter inside of her. And you can imagine that when Aussie is just even slightly emotionally distancing, that Mildred would have that triggered, right? And then tremendous pain and tremendous dysregulation. And then apparently Mildred's go-to defense is to lean in and to get angry, to voice herself in a way that she was never able to do when she was a child. Now she's going to have a voice. At least she can have a voice, right? The tragedy is that the defense pushes people away and the abandonment just repeatedly happens, and then you just have more reason to hate yourself and to engage in the defense and push people away. It's so unfair that some people are born into this world in a family where they will be harmed emotionally in this way, and that harm stays with them. And a lot of the times that harm results in self-sabotage, which causes more harm. And Mildred was just an innocent child born into the world like myself. I didn't go through what Mildred went through. Why did I not go through it? I'm not any better than Mildred. And why did I luck out? Why did Mildred get the short end of the stick? Why? And even with a lot of therapy, it could be hard. You could go to therapy for 10 years and get like 50% down the road with this. It's worth it, but it doesn't go away quickly, and often it never goes away. That's deep. Those schemas and those tendencies and those defenses and that sense of worthlessness is tough to kick. It's tough to get rid of. One could argue it never really goes away. So she might have already been through a lot of therapy, and that's why she's able to say this. Yeah, but just so sad for her.
And I don't want it to feel like it's my fault, and it is feeling like that, and I don't understand why. I don't want to be here alone.
Yeah. I mean, arguably it is at least partially her fault, right? Yeah. the extent of, I think, the voice in her head of, it's always your fault and you're worthless. No one will ever love you. You know, that's different than, wait, did I play a role in this breakup? Did I play a role in pushing Aussie away? That's different than, I think, what she's really talking about. Okay, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.